Hello, everyone, and welcome to version 2 of the 11th Gate of the Star series. I originally wrote this material in the 1980s, and I created a video series of it about 6 years ago. Several of the key videos and video series that I did at that time, I am now redoing. So this is encouraging me to do that because it was so primitive at the time. That is, my ability to create these videos, the technology that I had available to me on my computer was just not really all that good. And also, there's an energy shift in all of this. I just feel guided to bring it back again on another level. So that's what I'm doing. And the 11th Gate of the Star is one of the most, I believe, one of the most powerful transmission series that I have ever brought through thus far. And at the time I wrote it, of course, I had no idea I would be able to place it in this kind of video context. So we're going to begin by my reading. All of this is I'm going to be reading to you from the original material. And the first part has to do, it mentions the Johannine consciousness. So because I don't talk about that a lot now, it's in my older writings, I'm going to take a moment to share with you what that's all about, just briefly. That would be spelled Johannine. Now that term you can find in some esoteric texts, not written by me. Not very much. It's the only place, really, I think the only place I found it was in Mary Cain's book on the Glastonbury Zodiac. It's an old and hard to find book. I think it's out of print now. I do have it still, but it's called The Glastonbury Zodiac by Mary Cain, I believe is her name. Caine. And so when I read about that, and she mentions it basically as a doctrine of St. John, meaning St. John the Apostle. Now, Thoth sees St. John the Apostle and St. John of Revelations as the same entity. He's never said exactly it's the same incarnation. At first, I thought that's what he might mean. And then I thought, well, maybe not. So maybe it's two different incarnations of the same soul, and maybe it's the same person that just lived a long time. I don't know. It's kind of a, in-between point. But the point is, it's the same soul. And so Mary Cain speaks of him, though, as the apostle, and the doctrine that he put forth in saying that it was St. John that spoke about and brought the Christian doctrine out to the people before Peter did and before Paul did. And that this doctrine has largely been lost because it was, at the very beginning, and a lot of what came afterward was sort of washed anew by the Roman Church, who picked up on St. Peter big time, and some of Paul's doctrines as well. Although Paul also continued more the Johannine consciousness aspect for a while. Yeah, I know Paul was, he had some ideas that many of us today would not agree with, including me, having to do with women and a few other things. But basically his doctrines, he did carry a lot of the Johannine doctrine forth. So what differs between the Johannine doctrine and the Paul doctrine? Well, according to Mary Cain and Thoth, because he agrees with her, the Johannine consciousness or doctrine, Thoth refers to it as consciousness. I don't believe Mary Cain does. She calls it doctrine or religion or whatever. But the Johannine is more about awakening the parts of the inner being that know the truth. The doctrine of St. Peter, which has largely become the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. So let's not give St. Peter a bad rap on this. you know, it just sort of evolved into them taking that over and making more of it than Peter would have intended, is more of, you listen to us. We'll tell you how it is, and that's what you're going to believe. So it's a doctrine. Say Peter really was more of a doctrine of faith. And he wasn't saying, of course, about the Roman Church. He was saying, Christ said this, so you must believe it. Because he demonstrated that he was a true Christic being. So because he was that, you must believe what he said. And the Johannine doctrine was, yes, Christ was a true Christic being. Yeshua embodied that Christic being, but he's not asking you to believe something that is not in your heart and in your inner knowing. He demonstrates it to quicken that inner knowing. And that inner knowing speaks to you of the truth. Now, I'm putting it into the Thoth words right now. That's how Thoth presents it. But Mary Kane would go along with that because basically that's what she was more or less saying as well. She basically just stated that the doctrine of St. Peter was faith and the doctrine of St. John was knowing. And Thoth has kind of fleshed it in from there. So I think it's important for you to understand this because the whole 11th gate of the star is the receiving of the dovine mantle, the mantle of the dove, which is the mantle presented through receiving the true flame of the Johannine consciousness. And the consciousness is not a doctrine. The consciousness is the natural flow of inner knowing. As we have here, New Earth Star Inner Academy. Thoth gave me that title to use a few years ago. He may give me another one tomorrow, but right now that's what I'm using. And it's inner, the Inner Academy is the inner knowing. So, okay, we've set the stage, and I'm going to begin to read you the introduction. This is not the actual process. That will come in another video of this series. But we're going to begin with the actual process. And you know, because it is a process unto itself, even when I said we're going to begin with the inner process, I mean we're going to begin with the introduction to the inner process. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on a separate video because in discussing all this up front, that's one thing. It's one vibration. And I want to now begin the second level of vibration. So I'm going to conclude this video and we're going to go to the second video of this series.